Hello and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We'll be taking a look back at some of our environmental stories throughout the past year. International Earth Day happened last April, and it's been over 50 years since a global movement to protect the planet was launched. This year's event was hosted online by U.S. President Joe Biden, and Canada announced its new climate change strategy. Jamie Pashagumscum brings us this.
The goal is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2050. This means limiting greenhouse gas emissions. In what he called bold steps, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau outlined Canada's strategy.
Our new climate target for 2030 is to reduce our 2005 emission levels by 40 to 45%. And we will continually strengthen our plan and take even more actions on our journey to net zero by 2050.
This is a step up from Canada's previous commitment of 30%. But it's not enough, according to the Green Party of Canada. They say Canada is way behind countries like the UK and Japan.
The reality is that Canada is a top 10 emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. Canada is a top 5 emitter per capita of greenhouse gas emissions. Our greenhouse gas emissions increased last year, even in the midst of the pandemic, and we have barely succeeded in moving the needle in reducing greenhouse gas emissions at all. We have never succeeded in meeting our target.
Paul stressed the need for green jobs, which are being lauded as the potential driving force for future economies.
All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up. Those that do take action and make bold investments in their people and clean energy future will win the good jobs of tomorrow and make their economies more resilient and more competitive.
Biden said climate change isn't just a threat, it's a race to overcome the existential crisis of our time. But at least the added bonus of the 1.5 degree target might just lead to massive green job creation. Jamie Pashagumscum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Combating climate change was a top priority for Northern voters during this past election. Criticism was cast on politicians during debates for failing to meet climate targets. But future leaders, Indigenous youth, say they aren't waiting around to take action. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings you their perspectives.
I surround myself around really optimistic youth, and we believe we will change.
Over a dozen youth from across the territories are at this camp in Detta for 5 days, hosted by non-for-profit group Ecology North. They're learning about how to take action in a climate crisis.
United States.
Through activities like mock Arctic Council meetings, and learning from Indigenous rights knowledge holders like Daniel Tetzeli, who attended the first summit in 2009.
What are the human causes of climate change? So going beyond just looking at carbon dioxide emissions and fossil fuels, what are the structural causes, like the power structures in governments, laws, and societies more broadly that have kind of led us down this path?
We see ourselves as part of the environment.
Joshua Komanapik, a participant, teaches his peers about how Southern academics peg Inuit food security adaptation.
And some of those people, they've come up with something called the vulnerability framework. It would be like the function of vulnerability to climate change equals the exposure.
And how it's faltered.
Because it kind of is a paternalistic way of looking at people, because in reality, every single human being on this earth is vulnerable to climate change. And it kind of takes away the agency that we have as Inuit, as resourceful, adaptive people.
Back home in Iqaluit, Siku Rojas sits on a youth committee council with the goal of making a recycling system in Nunavut using a machine called Precious Plastics.
I really want to make those machines in Nunavut and get youth involved so that they can get credits for high school so that they can graduate, because I know we have really low graduation rates. And then they could also recycle for the community and make products and sell these products.
Nika Silverfox Young is working to save the Yukon River salmon species by learning her language.
They were in a time of need, and Spider came to us, and he actually he taught them how to weave a net. And so that's why the word spider net and fish net are so close to each other. And that's one word in our language. And that is a whole story behind it.
And learning from elders on how to exchange perspectives in a good way.
My favorite thing that she said was talking about, like, we have to be compassionate. So in my language of Northern Shoshone, so it's anki, so it'll be like tolit anki. So it's just traditional laws that we have to abide by.
For youth here, you can't talk about the effects of climate change without unpacking trauma. But it's resilience they choose to draw on when taking action.
We have high suicide rates because we have like high dropouts, and we have that because of like it all leads back to each other and it all affects one another. Everything connects everything, and everything brings it down. But if you fix one thing, then it can definitely bring everything back up.
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Detta.
A unique geothermal energy project in northern BC is soon to be up and running. The Fort Nelson First Nation hopes to produce enough clean energy from the project to power 10,000 homes by 2025. APTN's Lee Wilson explains.
A blessing ceremony was held at Clark Lake Field, signaling the completion of 2 geothermal wells in northeastern BC. Fort Nelson First Nation is one step closer to completing one of Canada's first geothermal projects, and it's 100% Indigenous owned. The plant will use heat generated from fluids inside the earth and create renewable energy. Chief Charlene Gale shared the importance of the project to the region.
And we just want to bring a revolutionary project to our community so that we can share it with our neighbors and our relatives up in the north. And there's a lot of things that come with that, whether it's food security or powering the territory in a way that helps meet our net zero for 2050.
The site was also renamed Tudeka, which translates to water stream in English. It was a former natural gas site, repurposed for geothermal energy. The Fort Nelson region is not connected to BC's main power grid and is still dependent on fossil fuels. The geothermal project will help reduce carbon emissions. Scheduled to be complete by 2025, it is estimated to produce enough clean energy to power over 10,000 homes.
One of the things that's most important and on the forefront of many First Nations minds when they think about economic is environmental stewardship. So there needs to be that balance that happens between the two. You can't have one and not the other, so you have to really find that balance.
Fort Nelson secured nearly $100 million of funding commercially, as well as contributions from the federal and provincial governments. Chief Gale wants Tudeka Geothermal to provide enough jobs for her people to return home and inspire the younger generation to think of new career paths.
Inspire them so that they can pursue career paths and stay close to home. But the opportunities are nation building opportunities. It will create sustainable jobs for our community and neighboring communities in Northern Rockies.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, we'll take a look at a mine in the Northwest Territories that's a first of its kind in Canada. Welcome back. A new mining project near Yellowknife is making history as the first in the country to produce rare earth minerals, and local Indigenous business operators will be the ones extracting the goods. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs took a tour of the mine and has this story.
The Northwest Territories resource sector has a new kid in town. Nachalacho Mine, around 100 kilometers east of Yellowknife, entering production this spring, is the first Canadian producer of rare earth minerals. APTN was invited to a media tour of the mine.
And this is some of our gear here. We have 3 40-ton rock trucks. We're using that to haul ore to the crusher.
According to Cheetah Resources, operators of the project and owners of deposits near the surface, it's also the first time in Canada an Indigenous group is contracted for extracting minerals in its own territory. something Kyle Bea is proud of.
Everywhere else I've ever worked, I've always been one of the minority, right? I've always been either only one or the either only few. And around here, it's been pretty much 80%, I guess, 80% native. So it's good.
Bea is a heavy equipment operator, originally from Delaney, Northwest Territories.
Like, there's a lot of people back home that don't have tickets and don't have training, and they just don't. They don't work, right? They don't have that. And I was lucky to get out and get my ticket.
Vice President of Operations David Conley says the demonstration phase of the project is small, with around 30 seasonal jobs this summer.
We expect the physical footprint will be less than 10% of the average NWT diamond mine.
While smaller in scale, the secret is in the sorting.
No chemicals. It's actuated by air. It has fiber optics X-rays that's going to illuminate similar as a diamond. It's going to recognize that that product that we need and the product that we don't need.
An expected 600,000 tons of ore-bearing rock will be extracted. 100,000 tons of that will contain the minerals used to power things like vehicles, wind turbines, and cell phone cameras.
That's the bastnasite. The white, that's the quartz matrix. That's basically what we're mining, two minerals, quartz and bastnasite, and because it's so coarse, it's going to be super easy to liberate.
For Bea, who's worked in mines across the north, he's happy there's no tailing ponds.
I was down in Fort Mac last year, and like all the impacts down there I see, right? And like not much animals, and ground's all drying up, turning to sand and stuff. And with this no tailings, with this process we got here, I'm pretty happy to be environmentally friendly, right? And
product will be sold to Saskatchewan for processing, then shipped to Norway for fine separation of rare earth elements and sale. If all goes well, Cheetah hopes to hit the second phase by 2024 and expand into a larger open pit. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Nachalacho Mine, Thor Lake.
A proposed coal mine project in southern Alberta could provide hundreds of jobs and bring in significant economic benefits. But some members of nearby Indigenous communities say those benefits don't outweigh environmental impacts and had been urgently working to educate their community before the project is approved. Tamir Pimentel has the details.
The Blackfoot communities, Piikani and Kainai nations, run along the eastern slope of the Rockies. This is near the proposed site for the Grassy Mountain coal mine. All Treaty 7 First Nations have written letters of support for the project, but Piikani members like Adam North Pagan are still working to educate residents with virtual meetings.
Now that this project has kind of moved itself along, there's nation members, including myself, that are really concerned about it. And I think it's time to kind of put the brakes on and kind of step back and kind of look at the big picture.
The project by Australian-owned Benga Mining is a proposed steel-making coal mine that will be developed on a previous mining area. It's projected to produce around 93 million tons of coal over its 23-year lifespan. It's supposed to provide hundreds of jobs and bring in economic benefits, but thousands, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, have formed groups in efforts to stop the mine to prevent environmental damage. This Facebook group has grown to have over 24,000 members.
This is something that has not happened in Alberta. We are always at odds, and so I'm really hoping that maybe this is an educational opportunity for the general Albertan to learn about what these lands mean.
Latasha Calfrobe of the Kainai Nation created the Nitsitapi Water Protectors Group. She calls the mine an attack on tradition, culture, and livelihood.
These mountains as a whole hold the stories of how our people came to be, how we, came to steward and and occupy these areas of land. There's so many things at risk here.
When the Piikani Chief and Council wrote a letter of support for the mine in 2019, North Peigan says community members were left in the dark.
We didn't really have too much information on the detail of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project that's within our territory.
Fast forward to 2021, Chief Stanley Grier of Piikani reiterated his support in another statement. The only individuals that can and should speak on behalf of the Piikani Nation on all matters related to our lands is myself, the chief, along with my council. He also wrote, Piikani Nation fully endorses the Grassy Mountain Initiative. On Piikani, strong winds are always blowing. North Peigan says one major concern among residents is the toxins that could be blown into the community.
Even though I'm all for economic benefits, but there's also a flip side to the coin, and we need to really balance that off with the, being able to protect the environment.
APTN has reached out to Piikani Chief and Council for a comment. We are unable to reach them. The Grassy Mountain coal mine is currently being reviewed by provincial and federal regulators. If it's approved, construction for the project will begin in late 2021 with coal shipments in 2023. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Now, that project was later scuttled by Alberta's environmental regulator and the federal government, but those two separate decisions are being appealed by the mining company and two area First Nations. All right, we need to take one more break, but still ahead, stories about solar power as we continue to look back at our environmental stories from the past year. Welcome back. In Saskatchewan, a solar-powered greenhouse is up and running at the high school in the far northern community of Île-Lacrosse. And as APTN's Priscilla Wolf tells us, the students aren't just learning about solar energy, they also helped build it.
We want them to learn about solar energy, and possibly some of our students will look at careers in this sectors.
The mayor of Île-Lacrosse, Dwayne Favel, says the community hired WDusk Energy to combine traditional with modern ways by running their high school greenhouse by solar power.
We built a greenhouse a couple of years ago, and we needed to find ways to save energy or at least be efficient.
It's a great opportunity for these students. The greenhouse grows produce and the students help maintain the greenhouse and maintain tradition.
For a northern community like Île-Lacrosse, it's all about food security and certainly, traditionally, I think, all families in Île-Lacrosse certainly had their own backyard gardens.
David Isaac is the president of WDusk Energy, Inc., that operates out of Vancouver. Isaac is Mi'kmaq, and the company is Indigenous owned and operated. He says adding solar panels and teaching the youth about solar energy goes beyond traditional teaching.
This instantly modernizes a community. This is already adding to a community that's already put in a lot of very good infrastructure, but this is just a continuation of really what an overall long-term vision is happening here at Île-Lacrosse.
The greenhouse at Île-Lacrosse High School is prepped and ready and should be on the grid for the new school year.
The plan with the Île-Lacrosse School Division is that the students will be offered a accredited program, to work with the greenhouse.
Mayor Favel says the students helped install the solar panels and worked with Isaac, and he thinks it sparked interest among the students.
We're hopeful, and they are extremely engaged. They're interested to learn about solar energy.
Favel says that this solar greenhouse is just one phase of the overall plan to incorporate solar power into the community. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
After having partnered to build a 2-megawatt solar farm in their community, the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation has begun construction on 3 solar farms south of Calgary. The $140 million investment will have an output of 67 megawatts with enough energy to power 22,000 homes. The farms are expected to go online within the next year.
I think it is the right move to do, not only for green energy, but to promote ACFN and go down that path, because it's a source of revenue that will always be there for future generations. We're cutting away from the oil and gas sector. If anything was to ever happen to the oil and gas sector, at least we'll have another flow of resources coming in.
Temperatures in Iqaluit were hovering at right around freezing back in January. Now that's very unusual. The average temperature for January in Iqaluit is much lower, 25 degrees Celsius lower. Our Kent Driscoll was out in the balmy weather and has this.
It's 0 degrees out in Iqaluit today. That's not usual for this time of year. This is what we usually get.
This time of year, it's usually cold enough for silly weather stunts, like we did back in 2015. And it's usually stormy enough that going outdoors is a challenge, like this from 2014. Not today. Today it is 0 degrees in Iqaluit. Average temperature this time of year is usually minus 24. We wanted to know, do Iqaluit think this is climate change or just a weather fluke?
It's a climate change. It's weird. Yeah.
How is the climate changed from what you can remember from being a kid to now?
It was very cold at this month, but it's been like almost very spring weather.
Like I'm wearing my summer jacket today, which is crazy, but I'm not complaining.
This unseasonal weather causes problems all over the city. City crews like this one are constantly flushing ice out of sewer lines due to the constant freezing and thawing. And the roads, have a look. It's like a skating rink out there.
If it gets warm during the day and the night it gets cold, the roads are slippery. And
sea ice is like a highway for Nunavummiut. Warm weather hurts that ice, which hurts hunters in the part of Canada with the highest food prices.
It's because of for the hunters and for the animals, because it affects the animals also.
Inuit climate change activist Sila Wakluche famously titled a book, The Right to be Cold. This week, here in Iqaluit, Iqaluit lost that right. 0 in January in Iqaluit is weird. And with the constant movement of climate change, there is potential for it to get even weirder. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight. We hope to look back at some of the environmental issues we covered over the last year, provide some food for thought and action. As we leave you some pictures of the solar eclipse from this past summer, thank you for joining us. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have a great night. Monjo captured a solar eclipse this past summer over the Toronto skyline. He walked 1.5 kilometers with all his gear to the escarpment in the Mount Nemo conservation area west of the city. He sped up this footage 8 times in order to capture the event. The so-called Ring of Fire eclipse was visible from many regions all around the world, but looks like Steve had a fantastic vantage point in southern Ontario.